So not so long ago from the time of recording this video, it was announced that Stanislaw would be removed from Team Liquid, and in his place would be Steel from Immortals, who has already played some tournaments with Liquid and has left Stanislaw's future very uncertain, as the timing really doesn't seem like it could be much worse for him considering the current landscape for the North American region. And I did just want to touch on him as a player, talk a little bit about his history, and then talk maybe a little bit about what could be the future for a player like Stanislaw. Now, Stanislaw played in some of the lower leagues in North America for some time, kind of playing in Main and Premier. And I even remember there was some drama going on the ESCA forums back in the day when he was first coming up, where people actually thought that he cheated. You know, people were making accusations against him. And I'm not sure if it was so much about his aim that caused these accusations to happen, or if it was more about just the fact that his timings were really good on flanks and rotations, and he always seemed to make the right call because he was in-game leading some of these teams in the lower leagues. And I think that kind of was a lot of the reason why people made accusations. And so that's kind of how I first came across his name. But then I actually started to watch him play a little bit, mostly when he was playing on a team called Mobility. And this was back in about 2014, and really the only player that you would know besides Stanislaw from this team is probably Davey, who now plays for Splice and played for Splice in the past, and he's played for some other teams as well. And at this tournament, they came second to the iBuyPower lineup, you know, that had Days and all those guys. This is, you know, well before anything to do with the bans or anything like that. You know, even watching him at this tournament, while there wasn't really much competition outside of Mobility and iBuyPower, so it's a really hard tournament to read, but watching him play, you could see the intelligence there. You know, he wasn't one of these young players that was just always running around and doing something crazy and hunting for frags. He was very intelligent in his play. He did seem to make good decisions individually as a player, and how he positioned himself and how he moved across the map. And so he was a fun player to watch in that regard, and he was shot calling for this team, and for the most part, outside of some shenanigans here and there where they're just having fun at the tournament, they did look pretty sharp in a lot of ways. And really, though, after that team didn't really, you know, do much. They wound up not even, I don't think, going to that ESWC tournament, because even though they qualified, I guess they didn't have the money to go or something like that. This is before, you know, you really saw all the orgs paying for trips and stuff like that. So it was not until Tempo Storm in CEVO Season 7, this is like mid-2015, that I started seeing him again, and he was actually playing with Roka, who is on Splice now, with Davey, and then you had Rix, who is kind of uncertain right now what he's going to be up to. Then obviously Shazam, who plays for Misfits, and Automatic playing for Cloud9. And at this tournament, they actually had like a really close series against Virtus Pro on a map, and they looked pretty good. They even took a map off of Navi at this tournament. And so they kind of made a little bit of noise in that regard, but they immediately failed afterwards at the ESL1 Cologne 2015 qualifiers with losses to Liquid, and the team basically died at that point. And this kind of left Stanislaw in a weird spot, because from this team, you actually had Rix and Shazam joining up with Daps and Rush and NAF, and they made this team called Conquest. And, you know, Stanislaw was kind of left out of it, and he actually went and played on this team called Coast. I think they might have been called Lunatic before that, and they were playing like in CEVO Pro League and stuff like that. And none of the players on this team people would probably really know too much about other than Stanislaw. But anyway, he played with them for a bit, and he looked pretty good individually in this team. He played a different role in this team. He was doing a lot more entry fragging on Coast, it felt like, as compared to other teams where he was more of like a lurker, and that is his, you know, more preferred role, it seems like, when you look at his history. And he kind of played on this team, and they weren't really doing a whole lot with results, but he individually was looking pretty good as a player. And then he wound up getting picked up by Conquest because they decided to cut Rix, and they pick up Stanislaw in his place. And with this team, they actually took top 4 at the CEVO Season 8 finals back in November of 2015, where they had a win over Liquid, and the Dignitas lineup that was, you know, before Config joined, back when they still had Pimp, and before they got that really strong lineup for the beginning of 2016. And then they wound up losing the Mouse Sports in a 1-2 semifinals. And then obviously this team becomes Optic. They qualify for League Season 1, but outside of that, this team obviously had a lot of struggles, not making Columbus, not doing so well at CEVO Season 9, and they really didn't pick things up until around ESL1 New York 2016, so towards the end of the year. And at this event, they actually did pretty good in the group stages, and they wound up winning, obviously, Northern Arena Montreal, and they wound up winning E-League Season 2 and came second at ECS Season 2 finals to end 2016. And then, obviously, Stanislaw left the team, you know, at the very beginning of the next year after they struggled at the E-League Major. And obviously, with this time on Optic, it was kind of tumultuous time time because he was cut for a period when they brought on Tarek, but then he wound up playing with them still, I think at Northern Arena Toronto, because Tarek couldn't go because he was going to a wedding or something, and so they kind of brought Stanislaw back for that. But then Daps wound up stepping down as the in-game leader, and then Stanislaw took up the in-game leadership, and then they got Tarek on board, finalized, and that's when they finally had that success at Northern Arena Montreal E-League Season 2 and second at ECS Season 2. And like the results were looking really good until they failed at the Major. And then right after they failed at the Major, Stanislaw leaves the team. And obviously this was a lot of drama because it was a real head-scratcher for a lot of people outside the situation who were confused as to why a team that was having so much success would break apart after really one failure. FaZe kind of did the same thing, you know, with their pickup of, you know, Olaf Meister and Guardian in place of guys like Kiyoshima and Alu. It's kind of the same thing kind of emerged, but this was really weird because Stanislaw just kind of left and went to Liquid, and there was just a lot around this, you know, a lot of questions, a lot of wondering. Obviously, Stanislaw kind of came out with a statement stating that he just felt that he could tell the team wasn't going to do well going forward. He can kind of see the signs that things just weren't going well with their practice regimen and different things, and didn't feel like Optic had enough structure, like they were spread too thin because they were trying to have all these teams but they didn't have enough staff, and they didn't really have a coach while he was there. And he just kind of talked about how he just wanted, and I think they were trying to push maybe for additional content alongside actually just competing, and all Stanislaw wanted to do was compete. And so there was some different things going on there, and I don't even know the full story behind it. We've kind of heard a couple of different versions, but the bottom line is he leaves and he joins Liquid. And they had a rough first few events with Stanislaw on the team as the in-game leader. It wasn't really until the EPL Season 5 finals where they took top 4, which was mostly thanks to just doing well against NA teams in groups like Optic, who was falling apart now that Stanislaw had left, and then an Energy team that wasn't really that strong at the time. They did get an upset win over North in the group stages as well, which helped them get to playoffs where they beat Envy in the first best of 3 they played, but then they wound up losing to North in the semifinals in a best of 3. And this team really doesn't succeed again after that offline for another 3 or so months. It's not until Mykonos and ESL1 New York, those 2 second place finishes, where Stanislaw's not even calling anymore. It's Nitro taking up the in-game leadership after the player break. And then after that, though, there was kind of a huge dip in form from Stanislaw at New York where they were successful, and then obviously at Epicenter where they really struggled, and then E-League Premier, which, grant, they had some really tough groups at these events. He did do pretty good at the minor, but again, kind of lesser competition at that event. And then there was the iBuyPower Masters, which was his last event with the team, which maybe he already knew he was kind of being removed when that event was happening, so you can't read too much into it. But at the very least, you can say that Stanislaw's forms really started to dip towards the end of his time with Liquid, and he wasn't even in-game leading anymore on top of that. And so when you kind of combine those two things together, it does make some sense that people would question his value to the team over at Team Liquid. I still thought, you know, if he could get his individual form back up, that he could probably still bring value to the team as an intelligent lurker, a pretty good side anchor on certain maps, and being able to assist Nitro with in-game leading. I thought there was definitely still value there, but apparently there was internal conflicts from a rather long twit-longer that Stanislaw put out, where it was mostly just disagreements amongst players on the team, particularly disagreements between himself and Zeus on the direction of the team as far as what style that they wanted to implement, and you know, what type of system they wanted to use, and just differing opinions between Stanislaw and Zeus in that regard, and that causing issues almost to where it turned into like a him or me situation with Zeus Stanislaw, and obviously Zeus kind of comes out the victor on that. Not that I don't think his job was ever actually in jeopardy, but it just seems like there was a bit of a leadership struggle, and Zeus was the more valued piece in all of that, which leaves Stanislaw now without a team. And what does this mean for his future is kind of the big point. And I'm kind of scared for his future, I guess you could say, because for one, I know that Stanislaw values a loose playing style. That's the type of in-game leader that he is. When I would watch the teams that he called for, like Optic, when they were having success play, I was impressed with how they played. It seemed like even though they were a very fast-paced and aggressive team, they were really good at being coordinated. You know, they would just swarm and trade on bomb sites. They had a lot of aggressive riflers. Obviously, they had guys like Tarek and Rush being entry fraggers, but they had a guy like Mixwell who would pick up a rifle, and he would entry too. Even Stanislaw's role kind of changed a little bit from time to time, where he obviously liked to play peripheral roles, but there was always kind of a role conflict with him and Naf, which meant that you would sometimes see Stanislaw be more aggressive, and I felt like he kind of added to the entry force in that regard as well. and it's something that Tarek and Rush have obviously kind of carried over to Cloud9, is just being able to swarm bomb sites, have a lot of good, riflers, and be able to trade your way in. But you have to do it in a way that's coordinated. You can't just be super chaotic, just running all over the place like chickens with their heads cut off. Like, there has to be some type of structure to the chaos, so to speak. And they looked pretty clean. And so I did give a lot of credit to Stanislaw for this. But from talking to Stanislaw and from listening to him in interviews, again, he really favors the loose playing style. And when I actually talked to him in person after they won Montreal, I even kind of asked him a little bit about his in-game leadership. And granted, this is kind of like right at the beginning of an after party, so it's not necessarily the most constructive conversation. But he basically said that I didn't really have to say or do much as a shot caller for that tournament. I mean, most people were just playing well, making their own decisions, making their own reads. I kind of let them have that freedom to do that, and they were doing a good job with it. And so I didn't really have to do a whole lot as an in-game leader. And so when you think about all of that, that could cause for some concern, because I feel like there's not as much respect for in-game leaders that like a looser calling style, as opposed to an in-game leader who you know is really good at anti-stratting. And so he's very valuable because he can really read your opponents, or a very structured in-game leader who brings a lot to, solidifying people's roles and solidifying how they want to approach a map, how they want to attack certain areas on a map, setting up protocols for mid-round decisions based on initial information, something that obviously a team like SK mastered a lot, like, that slow, steady default was what really kind of got that team going, kind of drawing from the Navi style with Zeus. And so there's a lot of respect for people who can do that, who can really run a solid default and make good mid-round reads. There's obviously a lot of praise for in-game leaders who can innovate and bring new executes to the table, like designing new executes based off of maybe new smokes or flashes that they find, or in-game leaders that can develop talent, that can bring in new guys, help them find their role and place on a team, help them become a better player. There's a lot of respect for leaders who do those sorts of things, but it doesn't seem like Stanislaw is that type of leader from talking to him and hearing him in interviews. Like I said, he favors more just kind of letting his players have freedom, being more of a looser shot caller, trying to focus on his own individual play. He's one of those guys that never wanted to sacrifice his individual fragging for the leadership of the team. He always wanted to be able to focus on his own game and be able to output frags. And to his credit, he's been regarded as one of the better fragging in-game leaders in CSGO, particularly when you think about fragging in-game leaders in North America, because obviously some of the in-game leaders in North America that are respected, like a Sean Gares, like a Finesse, these guys weren't really known to be heavy fraggers, yet Stanislaw could be kind of a fragging IGL, kind of a throwback to a guy like Dazed, who was a pretty, high-producing fragger as an IGL back in the day for NA. So it has its pros and cons, I guess. I mean, at the end of the day, even if he is only a loose caller, he still is some type of caller. For teams that need some type of in-game leader, he could still bring some value in leadership. It's just, and maybe for certain teams, his calling style would mesh even better with the lineup of players that they're using. So you certainly have to take that into consideration. But I just wonder if maybe that is going to make him a little bit less respected amongst teams, that he's not known to be this really super structured, super tactical IGL. Also, you got to wonder if maybe his reputation's taking a hit due to the dip in form, due to the fact that he's had some weird departures from his past couple of teams. The Optic departure was definitely seen as a little bit odd from an outside perspective without knowing everything that was going on. And even with the Team Liquid thing, he did put out a pretty transparent and revealing tweet longer that did seem to, really explain the situation in great length, and was, pretty well respected that he was that transparent. But you do have to wonder, is there some type of personality conflict with him? Is he going to cause that type of issue for teams? It seems like no, because if you remember, after he left Optic, it seemed like Mixwell and Rush were going to join Liquid for a little bit there. And so if some of his former teammates were willing to jump ship with him over to Liquid and play with him still, seems like they couldn't care too much about personality conflicts if they were willing to go play with him again, even though it didn't wind up happening. It does still kind of play to the fact that maybe personality conflict isn't that big of a deal, but still with his kind of removal from these past couple teams, or his own decision to leave Optic, his removal from Liquid, and the dip in form, you have to wonder if maybe his rep has been damaged a little bit. I think most people still see him as an intelligent player and still see him bringing value as an IGL, but you never know if he's maybe taking a hit in some of these regards. Some of the things he brings to the table is that he is a smart player. He's flexible in his role. Again, he prefers being more passive and being more of a lurker and kind of playing the edge of the map, and he's very intelligent in playing that role. He's really good on his timings, so he definitely can play that role, but I have seen him entry at times back when he played for a brief time with Coast, some of his time on Optic. So he definitely can bring that to the table as being, you know, pretty flexible in his role, as well as being an IGL. I think he's a good side anchor as well on CT side. I particularly think of him on the A-bomb side on Cobblestone or the inner bomb side on Train. He just plays these spots really well. I'm making sure he buys time for his team, or making sure he calls the right timing to flank and try to assist in a rotation on the other bomb site. Just seems like he handles those types of spots really well, which I think brings a lot of value to a team's CT side. And then, of course, the fact that he's an IGL, which we've already touched on a lot. And while I have touched on Stanislaw a good bit about his looser style and such, I think it is important to note that he still can make good mid-round reads, he still can make adjustments mid-match, and he still can be that deciding voice when there's a bunch of ideas floating around. He can make the final finite decision that provides direction for the team in a round or throughout an entire match for their, you know, complete game plan. And there's nothing stopping him from being a more structured in-game leader if that's what's called for. He certainly is a smart guy, and I feel like he could develop that skill set if his team requires it. But the problem is that the timing is really hard on a guy like Stanislaw, because where can he really go? I mean, realistically, you're probably only looking at teams that compete in the NA region. I couldn't really see him going to Europe. If he did, it would have to be some type of English-speaking multinational team like a Esports or Hellraisers or something of that kind, and I just don't know if he would ever really do that. I mean, I think Stanislaw could bring some leadership to Mousesports and maybe do something with that team, maybe. And they do have a lot of players that like to be aggressive, and so keeping a looser style with those types of players could be good because there's a lot of firepower on that team. So maybe there's some weird world where him on Mousesports could actually work, but I doubt it. I just doubt that he would move to Europe, and maybe Mousesports doesn't even feel that's what they need to become a better team. So I just can't really see a move to Europe. Then you have to wonder, what the hell is Immortals doing? You know, maybe they would be willing to have a multinational English-speaking lineup, but they did just purchase rights to the Made in Brazil name. So I'm not really sure what Immortals' thoughts are going forward, but if they did some type of multinational team, then maybe someone like Stanislaw could be an option for an org like Immortals. But if you're counting that out and you're just focusing on the North American lineup of teams, going back to Optic is something that people have thrown around, but when you think about the nature in which you departed the team, the reasoning behind it, the fact that they might even just be moving back to Europe instead because all their players are European, it just doesn't make any sense. I think there's more of a chance that Finesse would join Optic as an in-game leader due to his relationship with the coach I'm a Pet and such before I would see Stanislaw going back to Optic just due to the history that's there. Maybe a bridge burned, perhaps. You know, not really sure. So I can't really see that happening, though I guess it could work. Cloud9 is just bad timing as well. Cloud9's way too successful right now to be considering a lineup change. Maybe at some point in the future, if Cloud9 started to dip in form, they weren't getting the results they wanted, maybe Tarek didn't feel like calling anymore. We know that Stewie doesn't really like to call. He only does it out of necessity. So if they ever hit a bump in the road, Cloud9, maybe there would be room for Stanislaw to come in to in-game lead that team. But then, you know, you have to think about who would you replace. Certainly, there could be an issue that they have too many aggressive riflers, too many people who can do entry work, but maybe struggle a bit in playing peripheral roles. And so maybe you would just have to replace one of the star riflers with Stanislaw to bring in an in-game leader and bring in a more passive force to the team. So that could be a thing. But, you know, or you could see someone pick up the op and Ska have to depart because there's a lot of call for that, though I don't think that that's necessarily necessary. That's pretty terrible. But anyway, so I just think it's bad timing. I think Cloud9 are too successful right now. I personally wouldn't touch Cloud9 right now until they hit a bump in the road. Like, see if Tarek can keep developing as a caller. See if you can't, you know, keep working together, keep figuring things out. So bad timing, maybe in the future, Cloud9, but not right now. CLG died, so, well, that's gone. So you're not gonna be able to join that team and try to do anything. Maybe the players that are left behind, if someone wants to fork over a ginormous amount of money to buy out their contracts, maybe you could see a team built that was led by Stanislaw that had a guy like Ethan on board. You go pick up a free agent like Ricky. well, not a free agent, I guess. He's still under contract as well. But yeah, maybe there could be some type of mixture there amongst those players of who's available. But for the most part, that team is dead as an organization, so wouldn't get signed by CLG at least. There's really no need for him on a Misfits or a Renegades right now. Misfits are seeing a lot of success with the minor they just played and how they're doing at EPL so far. They did make the playoffs. It's not over yet as I'm recording this video, so who knows how it'll finish, but they seem to already be improving without any need of roster change. Renegades obviously has really been, kind of climbing up the ladder alongside Misfits, kind of coming up the middle of the pack in North America, so no real fit for him on these teams. Energy is a possibility. I could see this maybe happening. I kind of talked about this in the video I did about CLG departing CSGO and the future for Finesse. I kind of mentioned Finesse could go to Energy as well. Mostly because on this Peaker's Advantage podcast, Daps mentioned that maybe he didn't want to in-game lead anymore. So if that's really true, or he didn't want to play anymore, but maybe he's changed his mind on wanting to play because he did step down for Rico to come in, but he's come back now, and maybe now he is wanting to play. Who knows? If that's ever decided he didn't want to play, wanted to coach, then maybe you could see a Stanislaw to Energy, but Finesse is also maybe likely there. Then you have your bottom of the barrel North American teams like Cole, Splice, Rogue. These are all teams that probably would be interested in Stanislaw, but that would be a huge step down from what Stanislaw is used to. So would he even want to take that huge step down, or would he rather kind of wait it out, see if he can't get onto a better team like Cloud9 if they start to dip, or whatever the case may be? I don't know, but the timing's pretty rough for Stanislaw. I do think he definitely can bring a lot to the table for some teams, but there are maybe some reasons for concern as well. Whatever the case may be, I hope that Stanislaw can find himself on a team soon and develop as a player even more, and maybe continue to be one of those IGLs from NA that we talk about in the future. So just want to do a video to talk about Stanislaw and what his future might be, and talk a little bit about him as a player. And if you guys enjoyed the content, please follow and subscribe for more. Thanks so much.